I wasn't looking for proof that Tartaria survived into the 20th century when I started this investigation. I was researching trade routes, medieval commerce, safe academic territory. Then I met Dr. Michael Brenner in a basement archive in Prague. He's sitting across from me now, and I can see it immediately, that particular exhaustion that comes from knowing something you can't unknow. His hands shake slightly as he spreads photographs across the table. Photographs that shouldn't exist. The timeline is wrong, he says. Not by decades, by centuries, and they knew. They always knew. The photographs show Tartarian settlements documented in 1914, communities speaking dead languages in 1938, buildings erected in 1889 using techniques from a civilization that supposedly fell in the 1700s. Think about what that means. Not that we misunderstood history. That history was deliberately rewritten. That Tartaria lasted much longer than we're told. And someone went to extraordinary lengths to make us forget exactly how long. The archive smells like old paper and something else. Fear, maybe. Michael had been cataloging Ottoman trade records for a university project. Routine work, expected conclusions. But in a box marked Military Correspondence 1910, 1915, he found something that didn't belong. Letters, dozens of them. Written in Russian, French, German, all describing the same thing. Active Tartarian settlements observed during World War I reconnaissance missions. I thought it was a filing error, Michael tells me. His voice is quiet. Tartaria fell in the 1700s. Everyone knows that, but these weren't historical documents. These were field reports, current intelligence. From 1914, he shows me one letter, French military observer, stationed near the Caspian. The handwriting is precise, methodical. Village discovered 40 kilometers east of designated coordinates. Architecture consistent with Tartarian construction, domed structures, geometric patterns, and stonework. Population approximately 200. Inhabitants spoke language unknown to our translators. Recommend no contact. Area to be avoided in future operations. The date, March 1914, 200 years after Tartaria was supposed to have ceased to exist. Michael had stared at that letter for an hour, then checked the box again. More letters. British reconnaissance, German intelligence, Italian cartographers, all from 1912, 1918, all describing similar discoveries, communities that shouldn't exist, speaking languages that were supposed to be dead, building in styles that belonged to a vanished empire. One report included a photograph, grainy, damaged by moisture and time, but clear enough. A village square, domed buildings in the background. And in the foreground, people, maybe 30 of them. Looking at their clothing wasn't European, wasn't Russian. The geometric patterns on their robes matched designs Michael had seen in 17th century Tartarian manuscripts, but this photograph was dated 1916. He felt something shift in his chest. That moment when the ground you're standing on turns out to be thinner than you thought, when certainty becomes question. When the foundation cracks. Michael went to Astrakhan first. The coordinates in the French letter were precise. The village should have been there, should still be there if the letter was accurate. It was February. Snow across endless steppe, the kind of cold that makes your bones ache. He hired a local guide, an old man named Dmitri, who'd spent his life in these regions. You're looking for the ghost village, Dmitri said when Michael showed him the coordinates. Not a question. My grandfather spoke of it, said it disappeared. They drove for hours, nothing but white horizon. Then Dmitri stopped the truck. There, he said, pointing to a low rise in the landscape. Michael walked toward it, his boots crunching through frozen grass, and then he saw them foundation stones, barely visible, arranged in the geometric precision unmistakable. He'd seen this pattern before, in photographs of Tartarian cities, in archaeological sites dated to the 1600s, but this wasn't an ancient ruin. The stones were too intact. No weathering, no subsidence, no centuries of erosion. He knelt down, brushed snow away from the stone, put his hand against it. Still cold, but the surface was smooth, almost polished. When did this village disappear? Michael asked. Dmitri was quiet for a long time. My grandfather said 1952. Soviet officials came. The people were gone the next day. Then bulldozers. Then nothing. 1952? Not 1752. Not a ruin from centuries past. A living settlement, erased within living memory. Michael pulled out his measuring tape, started documenting the foundation circle. Diameter 47 meters. Exactly. He measured 3 more circles, all identical. That kind of precision doesn't happen by accident. Doesn't happen without sophisticated planning. Without knowledge that was supposed to have been lost. The wind picked up. Dmitri stood by the truck, smoking, watching Michael work. Finally he walked over. "My grandfather told me something else," he said. The night before the people, Lefit he heard singing, coming from the village, not Russian songs, not Kazakh. Something older. He said it made his chest hurt to hear it. Made him think of things he'd never known but somehow remembered. Did he see what happened to the people? They were put on trains. West. That's all anyone saw. The officials said they were being relocated for work, better opportunities. But my grandfather said, their faces, they knew. They knew they weren't coming back. The French letter wasn't alone. Michael found 15 more. German military intelligence from 1916, British aerial reconnaissance reports from 1919, even an American geological survey from 1923, all describing the same phenomenon: scattered communities, speaking unknown languages, building in architectural styles that shouldn't exist, living in regions officially recorded as uninhabited. One German report was particularly detailed, a pilot forced to land near the Aral Sea in 1917. He described being helped by villagers who dressed in unusual manner, spoke no recognizable tongue, and possessed metallurgical tools of remarkable sophistication. The pilot specifically noted, their forges produced metals of exceptional quality. Our mechanics examined samples. Analysis inconclusive. Composition unknown. The report included photographs, grainy, damaged by time, but visible enough. Demode buildings, geometric patterns in stone, and people, dozens of people, looking at the camera with expressions Michael couldn't quite read. Not fear, not curiosity, something else. Awareness, perhaps, that they were being documented, being marked for erasure. But it was another detail that stopped Michael cold. The pilot had sketched one of the tools he'd seen, a metallurgical instrument. The design was complex, precise, and identical to a tool Michael had seen in a museum in Istanbul, labeled as Tartarian, circa 1650. Except this tool was being actively used in 1917. Think about what that means. Somewhere between the official collapse of Tartaria in the 1700s and the mid-20th century, these communities persisted, hidden, isolated, maintaining their culture, their architecture, their language, not remnants, not survivors, full-functioning societies that the modern world had decided didn't exist. And then, systematically, they were removed. Michael went to Kazakhstan next. Another set of coordinates from a British survey. The village had been larger, maybe 800 people according to the report. The surveyor had noted extensive agricultural terracing, irrigation systems of unknown design, and astronomical markers suggesting sophisticated calendrical knowledge. The location was now an industrial complex, Soviet-era concrete, rusting machinery, empty buildings being reclaimed by weather. He walked the perimeter, looking for anything, foundation stones, artifacts, any sign that the village had been real. An old woman was walking along the road. Michael approached carefully, showed her the photograph from the British report. "Do you know this place?" he asked in Russian. She studied the image for a long time. Her hands were weathered, knuckles thick with age. "My mother was born here," she finally said, "before the evacuation." "What evacuation?" 1936. Officials came, said the land was needed for development. Everyone was moved. 3 days. They gave us 3 days. She looked at the photograph again. My mother said the old language was forbidden after that. Anyone caught speaking it was arrested. So we forgot, deliberately forgot. It was safer. Michael asked what the language sounded like. The old woman shook her head. "I never heard it. My mother never spoke it. Not once, not even when she was dying." She handed the photograph back. "Some forgettings are deeper than memory." She started to walk away, then stopped, turned back. "My mother kept something. Hidden. She made me promise never to show anyone. But she's been gone 20 years now. Maybe promises expire." She led Michael to her small house. From beneath a loose floorboard, she pulled out a metal box. Inside, a piece of cloth, folded carefully. When she unfolded it, Michael's breath caught. Geometric patterns, woven in thread that still held color after decades. The design was mathematical, precise, and identical to patterns he'd seen in 17th century Tartarian textiles. But this cloth was in perfect condition, not centuries old. Maybe 70 years old, maybe made in 1936, right before the evacuation. "My mother made this," the old woman said. "One of the last things she made in the old way, before they made us forget." The pattern emerged slowly. Michael found references to 12 locations, 12 communities documented between 1912 and 1944, all described as anomalous settlements in official reports, all exhibiting Tartarian architectural characteristics, all speaking languages that military translators couldn't identify, and all erased. Sometimes the documents described voluntary relocation, sometimes administrative restructuring, sometimes nothing at all. just before and after aerial photographs showing settlements, then empty land. But 3 reports used the same phrase, security concern. Michael began mapping the locations, plotting them on a modern map of Central Asia. The coordinates formed a pattern, not random, not scattered. The settlements were spaced at regular intervals, approximately 340 kilometers apart, forming a geometric network across thousands of kilometers. That kind of spacing doesn't happen naturally. That's planning, that's infrastructure, that's a civilization, maintaining territorial organization. In the 20th century, Michael traveled to St. Petersburg, the Russian State Archive, requested files on internal relocations, 1930, 1950. Expected resistance, expected bureaucracy, got something else instead. The archival clerk was young, professional. She pulled his request form, read it carefully, then looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite parse. "These files are restricted," she said. "On what grounds?" "No grounds are listed. They're simply restricted." She leaned forward slightly, lowered her voice. "My supervisor would tell you they don't exist, but they do exist. I've seen the catalog entries. The files are physically present. Just sealed. Since when? 1954. The seal date is 1954, and they're not scheduled for declassification. No date given, which is unusual. Most restricted files have eventual declassification schedules. These don't." Michael asked why she was telling him this. The clerk was quiet for a moment. "Because you're the 3rd person this year to all working on similar research." She paused. The other 2 were denied access. Then they stopped researching. Completely. One switched to medieval pottery. The other took a position teaching high school. What made them stop? I don't know. But they stopped. She wrote something on a piece of paper, handed it to Michael. A name, Dr. Alexei Petrov, and an address in Moscow. He was one of the archaeologists. He might talk to you. Or he might not, but he's the only one who might. Sometimes I think about those other archaeologists. What they found, what they were told, what fear tastes like when you realize the silence isn't accidental. It's enforced. Michael found Dr. Petrov in a small apartment in Moscow. The man was maybe 60. Nervous. He looked at Michael's credentials for a long time before letting him in. "I don't work on Central Asian archaeology anymore," Petrov said immediately. "I study pottery, ceramic glazes, safe topics, non-controversial. I'm trying to understand why." Petrov made tea. His hands shook slightly. Finally he spoke. "I found census records from 1937 for regions officially listed as uninhabited, except the census-listed populations. Thousands of people living in settlements with Tartarian names, speaking languages marked as local, non-Russian, non-Turkic. Where are those census records now? Gone. I made copies. The copies were confiscated from my office. I was told I had misunderstood the documents, that the census had documented historical populations, not current ones. But the documents were dated 1937, current census, not historical." Petrov sipped his tea. 3 days after the confiscation, I received a visitor, government official. Very polite. He explained that my research was based on clerical errors, that I should focus on other periods, other regions. He mentioned my daughter, by name, mentioned where she went to school, said it was a good school, safe neighborhood. He hoped nothing would interrupt her education. "They threatened your family." "No, that's the thing. He never threatened, just mentioned. Casual conversation, but the meaning was clear. Continue this research and there would be consequences. So I stopped. I study pottery and pottery is safe." Michael asked if Petrov still had any of his research, any notes that weren't confiscated. Petrov was quiet for a long time. Then he went to his bookshelf, pulled out a book on Byzantine architecture. Inside, photographs, folded papers. "I kept the most important pieces," he said. "Hidden? I don't know why. Maybe because completely erasing your own work feels like erasing yourself." The photographs showed architectural details, close-ups of stonework, carved patterns, and dates scratched into stone. Michael looked at them carefully. One showed a cornerstone with text carved in Tartarian script, and a date, translated by Petrov's notes. "This is built in the year of the eagle's return, 1889. 1889. Not 1689, not a historical structure. Something built in the late 19th century, using Tartarian architectural techniques, using Tartarian script, by people who supposedly didn't exist." "Where is this building?" Michael asked. Where was this building? Petrov's voice was flat. "Demolished in 1956. The demolition order specified removal of all foundation stones. Complete site clearance. The order came from Moscow. High-level authorization for the demolition of what was officially listed as abandoned industrial structure. Why would they demolish it so thoroughly? Because it was evidence. Because it had a date. Because it proved continuity. Proved that Tartarian culture didn't end in the 1700s. It lasted. It built. It persisted. And that was unacceptable to the official timeline. There was one location Michael could still access. A geological survey from 1931 described a site in Kyrgyzstan, remote valley. Settlement of approximately 300. The survey had been conducted by a Soviet geologist named Pavel Vulkov. His report noted structures of unclear origin and local population maintaining pre-modern lifeways. The remarkable thing, Volkov's personal notes had been preserved separately from official records. His granddaughter had them. She agreed to meet Michael in Bishkek. Her name was Irina. She was maybe 60. She brought a leather portfolio. My grandfather never published most of his findings, she said. He was careful. After 1937, everyone was careful. Inside the portfolio, hand-drawn maps, photographs, and pages of dense notes in Russian. Volkov had spent 3 weeks in the valley. He documented everything: architecture, agriculture, social organization, and language. He tried to learn their language, Irina explained. He filled 2 notebooks with vocabulary, grammar structures, phonetic notes. He was trained as a geologist, but he was fascinated by linguistics. She showed Michael one notebook, pages of careful handwriting, Tartarian words with Russian translations and pronunciation guides. What happened to the settlement? Michael asked. Irina's expression changed. My grandfather returned in 1939 to continue his study. The valley was empty, every building demolished, the foundations dug up and removed. Even the agricultural terraces had been destroyed, systematically erased. Did he ask what happened? He tried. Local officials told him no settlement had ever existed there. When he showed them his photographs, his maps, they told him he was mistaken, that his memories were confused. They strongly suggested he not pursue them. Pulled out a single photograph. This is the last image he took, 1939, before he left the valley for the final time. The photograph showed a stone marker, carved with geometric patterns, and text. In a language Michael recognized from the military reports, Tartarian script. Someone had photographed it before destroying it, left evidence of what they were about to erase. But there was something else in the photograph, something Michael almost missed. In the background, a figure, partially visible, standing near the marker, watching Volkov photograph it. The figure's posture suggested authority, official presence, someone documenting the documentation, someone making sure the erasure would be complete. Michael brought the notebooks to a linguist in Berlin, Professor Elena Richter, specialized in dead languages, Central Asian linguistic families. She spent 3 days studying Volkov's notes. When they met again, Elena looked exhausted. This is remarkable, she said. The language has clear connections to Turkic roots, but the grammar structure is unlike anything in documented Turkic languages. And the vocabulary, there are words here that suggest technological and astronomical concepts that shouldn't exist in an isolated pre-modern society. She showed Michael one page, a word translated as star calendar keeper, but the root words suggested something more complex. The literal translation would be closer to one who maps celestial timing for ground resonance. That's not just astronomical observation. That's suggesting an understanding of how stellar positions affect terrestrial frequencies. She paused. That's sophisticated knowledge. Could the language be constructed? Artificial? Michael asked. No, the irregular conjugations, the idioms, the phonetic variations. This is a natural language, spoken for generations, possibly centuries. Elena closed the notebook carefully. This language existed, these people existed, and someone made very sure they don't exist anymore. She opened the notebook again, found a specific page. Look at this. Volkov recorded a conversation with one of the elders. The elder described their astronomical knowledge, said they maintained observations continuously since the first recording. Volkov asked when that was. The elder said a number. Volkov wrote it down. Then in the margin, he wrote, "This cannot be correct. Translates to 847 years of continuous observation. Must be cultural exaggeration or translation error." Elena looked at Michael. What if it wasn't an error? What if they'd been maintaining astronomical records since around 1080 AD? That would mean continuous cultural continuity for nearly a millennium. Through Mongol invasions, through Russian expansion, through Soviet industrialization, maintaining knowledge, maintaining language, maintaining identity. Until 1939, Michael said, until someone decided they couldn't anymore. Here's what terrifies me. Not that history was rewritten. We know that happens. Victors write history. Powers consolidate narratives. That's expected. What terrifies me is the precision of the erasure, the systematic nature of it. Settlements identified, documented, and removed. Languages recorded, then suppressed. People relocated, dispersed, told to forget, all within living memory. Michael found one person who'd been there, who'd lived in one of the settlements before the evacuation. His name was Yousef. He was 94 years old, living in a small apartment in Almaty. His daughter had responded to Michael's research inquiries. "My father never speaks of the old place," she wrote, "but perhaps it's time." Yousef sat in a chair by the window, sunlight on his face. He listened to Michael's questions in silence. Then he spoke. In Russian first, then switching to something else, a language Michael didn't recognize. Couldn't recognize. Tartarian. Yousef's daughter translated. He says he was 14 when the officials came. He remembers everything. The buildings, the ceremonies, the old teachers who knew the star keeping. He remembers the language. He never forgot. "Why didn't you teach your children?" Michael asked. Yousef's response was long, detailed. His daughter translated carefully. Because forgetting was survival. Because teaching the language would mark his children. Because the officials made very clear the old world was erased. Returning to it meant danger, so he kept it inside, locked away. For 80 years. Why speak now? Yousef looked at Michael for a long moment. Then he said something in Tartarian. One sentence. His daughter translated, "Because I'm dying, and some things shouldn't die with me." Yousef began speaking. Long passages in Tartarian. His daughter translated carefully. He described the settlement. Population of about 400. They grew grain, raised sheep, maintained astronomical observations, built in the old style, preserved the old knowledge. "We knew the world had changed," Yousef said through his daughter. "We knew the empire was gone. But we hoped, we could maintain ourselves in isolation, keep the knowledge alive, pass it to the next generation. We weren't bothering anyone. We just wanted to remember." He described the day the officials came. Spring morning, 1938, 3 trucks. Soldiers. A man in a suit who spoke perfect Russian, but whose eyes seemed to see through things. He told us we were being relocated, for work, for opportunity. He made it sound like we had a choice, but the soldiers stood behind him. We understood. We had 3 days to prepare. Yousef's voice cracked. Even 80 years later, even speaking through translation, the pain was immediate, present. The elders tried to take the important things, the astronomical records, the language texts, the knowledge books. The officials found them, confiscated them, said we wouldn't need them in our new location, said we'd be learning Russian, learning modern ways, said the old knowledge was superstition. One elder, his name was Rashid, he protested. Said the records were irreplaceable, 7 centuries of observations. The official laughed. Said 7 centuries of observations proved nothing. That if our ancestors had been so advanced, why did we live in such simple circumstances? Rashid said, "Because we chose to. Because some knowledge is for keeping, not for using. Because power without wisdom is dangerous." The official stopped laughing. He looked at Rashid for a long time. Then he said, "That kind of thinking is exactly why you're being relocated." Yousef closed his eyes. We left 3 days later, watched our settlement from the train windows. The buildings we'd maintained for generations, the observatory that had tracked stars for 7 centuries. Gone. We never saw them again. Michael recorded Yousef speaking for 3 hours. Stories, songs, technical terms for astronomical observations, descriptions of technologies he'd seen as a child. His voice was steady, clear, speaking a language that officially didn't exist, that no other living person could understand. When they finished, Yousef was exhausted. Michael thanked him, asked if he could return, continue the documentation. Yousef shook his head. "This is enough," he said in Russian. "More would be dangerous. For my family, they're still watching." Who's watching? The same people who watched then. Different uniforms, same purpose. Some erasures are ongoing. Think about that. In the 21st century, with global communication, internet, satellite imagery, there are still people ensuring certain histories remain erased. Certain languages stay forgotten. Certain timelines don't get corrected. Michael tried to publish his findings. Academic journals, historical reviews, archaeological quarterlies. Every submission rejected. Not on methodological grounds, not questioning his evidence. Simply, not suitable for publication at this time. One editor was more direct. Off the record. Over coffee in Vienna. "Your research is solid," she said. "The documentation is compelling, but we can't publish it. Our funding sources have made that clear." What funding sources? Government grants, university partnerships, international research consortiums. They've all indicated that research into post-1700s Tartarian continuity is, she searched for the right word, politically sensitive. Why? Because if Tartaria lasted until the 20th century, then the official timeline of Central Asian development is wrong. Colonial narratives are wrong. Soviet historical frameworks are wrong. And more importantly, if these communities were deliberately erased, someone has to answer for that erasure. Institutions, governments, archives that claim ignorance. That's not a historical footnote. That's a crime. She finished her coffee. Your research won't be published. Your career is likely finished. I'm sorry. But that's the reality. Some truths are too expensive to acknowledge. Michael's university position was terminated 3 months later. Budget restructuring. No other explanation given. His research funding was revoked. His archive access credentials were suspended. Other archaeologists stopped returning his emails. Colleagues he'd worked with for years suddenly became unavailable. Conference invitations were withdrawn. The signal was clear. Pursuing this timeline was professional suicide. But here's what they can't erase. What persists despite everything? The photographs exist. The military reports exist. The linguistic notebooks exist. Yousef's testimony exists. The foundation stones still sit in that frozen steppe near Astrakhan. The carved marker Vulkov. Photographed. Someone has that stone. Somewhere, buried in some warehouse or private collection, or government vault. The evidence exists. And the timeline is wrong. Tartaria didn't fall in the 1700s. It persisted, hidden, isolated, maintaining itself while the modern world was being constructed around it. Communities speaking ancient languages, building in ancient styles, keeping ancient knowledge, until someone decided they couldn't be allowed to exist anymore. Between 1912 and 1952, 12 documented settlements were systematically erased. Populations relocated, buildings demolished, languages suppressed, histories rewritten, not centuries ago, within the lifetime of people still living. I think about Yousef sometimes, sitting in that chair by the window, speaking a language no one else understands, carrying memories that officially never happened. He's dead now, passed away 6 months after Michael recorded him. His daughter called to let Michael know. She also said something else 2 days after you visited. Men came. Government officials. They asked what you discussed, what my father had told you. They were very polite, very insistent. They suggested my father might have been confused, misremembering. They suggested I destroy any recordings you might have made. Did you destroy them? Long pause. I made copies first, then I destroyed the copies they knew about. That's what resistance looks like. In the face of historical erasure. Small acts of preservation, copies hidden, memories kept, evidence scattered but not destroyed. Michael gave me copies of everything. The military reports, the photographs, Vulkov's notebooks, Yousef's testimony, hours of recorded Tartarian language, maps of demolished settlements, documentation of the systematic erasure. I can't publish this, he said. I can't work in archaeology anymore. My career is over, but the evidence shouldn't be lost. Maybe you can do something with it. So I'm doing this, putting it out there, telling you what Michael found, what Yousef remembered, what the archives tried to hide. The timeline is wrong. Tartaria lasted longer than we're told, survived longer than we're taught, was deliberately erased within living memory. And the institutions that perform that erasure are still operational, still enforcing silence, still restricting access, still making sure certain questions don't get asked. Why does this terrify me? Not because history was hidden. We've always known history is selective, written by those with power, shaped by those with control. What terrifies me is how recent this is, how systematic, how thorough. If they could erase entire communities in the 1930s to 1950s, if they could suppress languages, demolish settlements, relocate populations, rewrite timelines, if they could convince the world that civilizations fell centuries before they actually did, what else have they erased? What else are they still erasing? You're back in that archive in Prague. Michael, across from you. Photographs spread on the table. He looks at you with those tired eyes. I used to think history was about discovering the past, he says. But it's not. History is about controlling which past gets remembered, which timelines are permitted, which evidence is allowed to exist. He gathers the photographs carefully, puts them back in the folder. Tartaria didn't fall in the 1700s. That's a comfortable lie. A neat boundary, easy to teach, safe to believe. The truth is messier, more recent, more uncomfortable. The truth is, they lasted until someone decided they couldn't anymore. The archive is closing, lights going dim. You walk out together into Prague evening, cold wind, old buildings that have seen centuries of history being written and rewritten. Michael stops at the corner. I don't know what you'll do with this information, he says. I don't know if it matters. But at least now you know, the timeline is wrong. And someone went to extraordinary lengths to make sure we wouldn't discover that. He walks away, disappearing into the... And you're left standing there, Knowing what you now know, carrying evidence that powerful institutions insist doesn't exist. The question is, what will you do with it? The stone marker Vulkov photographed is still out there. Somewhere, the recordings of Yousef speaking Tartarian exist. Hidden, protected, waiting. The foundation stones still mark the step near Astrakhan, buried under snow, patient, remembering what we've been told to forget. History isn't fixed, it's a negotiation, a constant struggle between evidence and narrative, between what happened and what we're allowed to believe happened. Sometimes the evidence wins, sometimes it gets buried, but it doesn't disappear, not completely, not forever. The timeline is wrong, and now you know it too.